Hey everybody, welcome to Consent in Healthy Intimacy. My name is Angel Sumka, use they them pronouns. I'm a certified sex coach, sex educator, and I have a master's in counseling psychology. And you can check out my personal website at empowered-hearts.com and the Aspec website at aspec.ca. Pretty amazing content on both. To kick us off, I just want to say this workshop is hosted by ASPEC, which stands for Advocating for Sex Positive Education and Consent Culture. They're a registered nonprofit in Alberta, right now in the process of registering as a Canadian charity. We provide sex positive values through education, social spaces, community engagement, that kind of thing, with the goal of reducing intimate partner violence and gender-based violence by providing that education and whatnot. As for me, I'm a queer, femme-presenting, non-binary individual who's definitely all about social justice. Just finished a master's of counseling program at Yorkville University. I've got certifications for first responder sexual assault, sex education, sex coach, criminology, social sciences, stuff like that. If that sounds intimidating, don't let it. I am white, I'm able bodied presenting, I'm het presenting. And so all the information that I'm providing is going to come through those lenses. I've done a lot of work to try and unpack and undo my colonial view of looking at the world, but that is a work in progress. And so keep that in mind. I'd also like to start by honoring the land that I stand on. I am currently presenting to you from Treaty 8 territory, which historically and still today is home to many diverse Indigenous cultures. I'm still learning to unpack the privilege I have as a settler, and I support wholly the return to land rights. Anytime we're doing anti-oppressive work at ASPEC, we donate a percentage of what we bring in to local Indigenous groups that are working at restoring land rights as well. As a heads up, the content we are about to go through is going to talk about sex, intimacy, consent, and problematic areas that inform our relationships and intimacy scripts. As part of our safer space policy, I just want to suggest that everybody take a breath, pause when you need to, do what you need for self-care, and reach out if there's anything I can do to support you. The very foundation of exploring healthy intimacy in relationships has to be a very clear understanding of what consent looks like. And that is easier said than done. Some folks may know this model, the affirmative consent model, as a Fry's model. Affirmative consent means that only a yes is a yes. And not just a yes, an enthusiastic, informed yes. So from that sex positive learn, we're going to take this a little further, and we wanted to find ways, find what yes is, to include that the person who's agreeing is doing so without feeling pressured. They're enthusiastic about agreeing to do whatever's being discussed, and they clearly understand what they're consenting to. So the Fry's model is freely given, revocable, informed, enthusiastic, and specific. So FRIES. Ed, let's differentiate between affirmative consent and legal consent. So legal consent, I'm happy to say that in Canada, we have a very top-notch view of what sexual consent is legally, at least in the books. The Supreme Court rulings can reflect this. They ensure that consent is never assumed, can only be known by the person who's experiencing the interaction, and it must be revocable, meaning the moment a person is incapable of revoking consent, the consent is automatically revoked. There have been Supreme Court case rulings that also recognize that withdrawal consent is not necessarily verbal, but it is evident in the lack of reciprocity, change in body language, going still, crying, looking afraid, being uncomfortable, and so forth. And so that's the technical aspects of the law. It doesn't mean that that's how it plays out in lower courts. Ethical consent, when we're talking about consent in our personal relationships, our own morals come into play as well. So we need to recognize that our own experiences and scripts that we're taught, that we learn, they change the way we look at bodily autonomy and the way we look at the notion of intimacy, empowerment, communication. I would challenge everyone here to really consider their own sexual experiences, their intimacy goals, and are your goals aligned with the idea of mutual benefit? mutual pleasure, mutual enthusiasm. And if they're not, I invite you to explore that in a way that allows you to learn and grow from it. Sex positive frameworks constantly needs to be something that's gained with honesty, respect the person's boundaries, whether they're spoken or not spoken. If you're tricking someone into consent or you're maneuvering them, manipulating them into agreement, the moment we start looking at sex as something we can win, we're already, or something that we've already owned, that we already have the right to, that's where all this problematic lens comes up that we want to challenge. So let's discuss it. Does that type of consent match what you were taught about relationships and intimacy? When you think about that very high bar for consent, where a person has to understand what they're consenting to, they need to feel free to say no without repercussions, where they can change their mind at absolutely any time, then they are enthusiastically agreeing to the interaction. So how does that match up to the things that you or I were taught as we were growing up about relationships and intimacy? Is this what was demonstrated in our origin homes? How about our current homes? Our favorite movies? How about news ads? So go to the discussion forum and we'll take a look at that now. All right, so what is healthy intimacy? Let's brainstorm. So some of the things that have come up from previous brainstorms is that, and with all this conversation around consent and healthy relationships, let's look, what kind of things would you put in that green light zone for healthy intimacy? And this is a very subjective conversation. It's going to change based on your culture, your experiences, your ages, the type of relationships you're in, and that kind of thing. For example, I don't deal well with negative humor. I don't find it funny. So for me, that would be a red flag behavior. If you grew up with a good-natured teasing and that kind of humor is something that doesn't come up as unhealthy, and makes you feel like you're in a relationship where people trust you, that's a you perspective, right? So my point is, there are very few clearly good or bad things in relationships. So we're going to try and not judge each other. So here's a list of things that have come up in conversations as generally accepted healthy relationship things. Being able to talk about conflict without it falling into name calling, making people feel bad, tantrums, that kind of thing. Being able to talk about sexual health, being able to talk about sexual interest and pleasure without being made to feel ashamed or embarrassed or judged, and being able to have enough common experiences that you can relate to each other, but enough differences that you're not too intertwined, right? So a balance between being independent and being able to thrive in sharing that intimacy together. And then other people had things on there like being pleasure focused, and your balance is going to shift. And the whole point of this exercise is to think about what is important to you and why. Where did that come from? And are the things that you think important being reflected in your relationships or the way you approach your relationships? So when we move forward with these ideas, we need to remember to have some compassion for ourselves and our partners, because this idea of consent and bodily autonomy just isn't part of the day-to-day messaging that we receive or received in the past. So let's look at some of those messages. When we look at the relationship scripts, this is an example from an actual college course. Okay, did anybody else learn from a script like this? So as noted on the document, some scripts are based on gender. And as a queer person, I have to point out that these scripts are very heteronormative, meaning that they assume that the only way to gain intimacy, be that sexual or romantic, is with one guy and one gal. They're flirting, dating, sexual, and emotional expectations that are based on gender. Can anyone think of a gender-based script that they were taught about flirting, dating, sex, or relationships? These scripts are also very double standard based, in which women are not able to enjoy their own sexuality and men are not valued unless they're actively pursuing sex, and of course they can't turn down sex or not want sex. And it comes with this idea that boys have urges. That's just how it is. That statement prevails today, although it is being challenged more. And where does the burden of responsibility get placed with these messages? And sadly, this is an actual book title, and it reflects the idea that women are consenting even when they're not, and conversely, that men should keep trying even when they receive a no message. The obvious here is that the clear expectation is that he's just wanting sex and will do whatever it takes to get it. But it also indicates that nice or sweet means no interest in sex. And of course, women can't say yes and need to be tricked. Don't men want intimacy, not just physical? Don't women want sex, not just romantic intimacy? How would a little message to encourage and endorse that we can use angry, mean, controlling behaviors and call it love, or that expressing boundaries is unladylike or uncompassionate? And of course, relationship hierarchy. For men, it's get a wife in order to have unlimited sex. For women, it's get a husband to pretend to have headaches so you don't have to have sex. Additionally, married is the ultimate goal. Wanting less than marriage makes society look at you in our colonized society as if you were broken. Your spouse is supposed to be the most important earthy relationship that you'll have, the person that you're closest to. It doesn't matter if somebody is a lover, a date, a friend, a favorite aunt. They're no match for this level up. Now, again, some of these are over the top examples of dating, sex, and romantic scripts, but I'm sure you're getting the drift. How do these scripts create problems for those that want to feel safe in their intimacy with another important? And how does this impact the way we talk about sex and relationships and all of that? And that is the next form, please. For do these stereotypical relationship scripts help us in our intimate activities and in our relationships? All right. So now, here's some new scripts that we can use. So intimacy is about allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. We have to allow that vulnerability in order to be able to experience pleasure, love, to trust. When we view intimacy as either love or sex with gendered ideas about what we can want, what we should want, we're creating barriers to that vulnerability. When we view sex as something we do to another person rather than something we do with another person or that we win, we're unable to navigate boundaries, our own or anybody else's. So new scripts are all about consent, which means we have to understand boundaries enough to recognize when something's about us, when something is about them, or about everybody else involved. So I really like this graphic. It shows how communication can be used to express our willingness or unwillingness to have or respect boundaries, right? So I'm going to use sex as the thing I want for this first example. So say I go to my partner and say, I want to have sex right now. Is that assertive, aggressive, passive? Does this leave room for their desires, their feelings, their thoughts? And why is that problematic? Does it fit into the consensual framework? Okay, so how about this one? My partner obviously wants sex, and although I'm not into it, I just go with it and I say nothing. Is that assertive, aggressive, passive? And is it problematic, and if so, why? Say I go to my partner and I say, I want to have sex. Would you like to join me? Would you feel comfortable saying no? Why or why not? Okay, so curiosity instead of goal setting. Instead of approaching intimacy if there's rules and level ups, we can approach it with curiosity. What part of intimacy do we enjoy? What parts don't we enjoy? Diversity acceptance is a huge part of that self-curiosity. So stop thinking about what we're supposed to want, what we think someone else is supposed to want or enjoy, and really let ourselves be curious about what matters to us and what matters to our partner. And now we can extend that to our intimate circle. What did they enjoy? Sorry, trying to find my spot here. There we go. We can also practice respect for boundaries instead of rejection. So, consensual assertive scripts allow us to reframe someone not wanting to be intimate with us as them expressing their needs, their wants, and boundaries rather than as a rejection for our vulnerable selves. If we can allow people to have boundaries, then we can allow them to experience enthusiastic intimacy and ourselves. When we view pleasure as self driven, self responsible, not as something that's owed or earned, this can really foster some consensual ideas. So think about long term relationships. If you're feeling a little je ne sais quoi and you want some physical affection, who's supposed to give that to you? And why is that problematic and based on those taught scripts? We can also look at relationships based on merit, not title. So we can be close to whoever we're close to. Maybe your sibling's the person you care for the most, even though you love your spouse to bits. That's okay. Marriage is not a level up. Every single relationship can grow and drift apart depending on the effort of those that are in it, that they're putting into learning about each other, to supporting each other, developing their own self-awareness. All right. So there are some challenges and solutions we're going to look at here. One of the main challenges that comes up is how to deal with people that were happy with the old scripts. So when we start changing the scripts around consent and relationships, how do we deal with somebody who doesn't want to change, right? Because if we change our own behaviors, some of those around us are going to struggle with that. And it may be that they liked us being aggressive or passive. Aggressive because then they could martyr themselves and not take responsibility for their own intimacy. And, you know, it might be easier to manipulate if you were the one being passive, right? And so what are some of the challenges that can arise? And let's talk about some strategies for addressing these. Communication, not giving in, also letting them know that you're changing the scripts and they can either change them or get out is helpful. Utilizing a therapist, engaging a coach, things like that. But it really does come down to communication and holding to your values, right? So we can practice. For this, we're going to use our healthy relationship activity cards. You can show a red flag or green light depending on how you perceive that, and then we'll talk about the answers. All right, let's summarize this all up now that we've done the activity. You've all been fantastic, so I just want to thank you for that. So first, we need to remember that we learn about consent, that as we're learning about it, we also are going to learn about the harm that we have done or have felt, and so have compassion. Hindsight is very clear, but we can only know what we know. We can move forward expecting better and doing better. We can develop our awareness, that is think, challenge, rethink, confer, right? Develop that awareness. And when we're navigating intimacy, whether it's sex, romance, caring, we can be aware of our scripts. Challenge them. Are they helpful? Do they add something positive? If not, rethink them. Confer. Talk to your partner. Talk to your peers. Is your perception reflective of their experiences? Communicate with assertion. I need, I feel, I want, I think. Not you don't, you never, you always. I need, I feel, I want, I think. We can build our awareness around that red flag, green light stuff in relationships, so we recognize our own toxic traits, not just our partners, and take responsibility for ourselves, our pleasure, our intimacies, and shift our boundaries accordingly. Remember, the affirmative consent model is freely given, revocable with words and action, it's informed, it's enthusiastic, and it's specific. That think, challenge, rethink, I know we didn't talk about this a lot, but this is like an awareness thing. So it's actively taking time to think about the things we've done, right? Like, things didn't feel right last night. What actually happened? What part of that is feeling uncomfortable? I acted on this script. Was that script helpful? Did I like how that script went out? This is how I think it might have impacted my partner. This is how it impacted me. So what could I do instead? And then talk to them about it. If you're not sure what the right thing to do is, reach out to other people who are also doing this work and be like, what do you think about this situation? How can I move forward with this situation? Remember that assertive communication is communicating your needs rather than communicating to your partner what you think they should do. So it's like um, I need more space. I feel really happy when we cuddle together. Not you have to cuddle with me, but I really enjoy that, right? And then that green flag, red flag, green light, red light. Just starting to think about what we feel are healthy relationship traits and conversely what aren't. And then are we modeling them? Is our partner modeling them? And what that means for us and how to communicate about it. And also, it's your journey, your boundaries. That's what you're responsible for, along with your pleasure, which means you need to never stop growing and to be aware that this is a choice that you're making to be on this journey. Before you leave, don't forget your resources, a PDF handout, and the exit survey. And as always, Aspect loves donations. So thanks for coming out today.